Okay, good evening, everybody. Marty N6VI, and we're going to talk a little bit about improving communication skills, particularly voice messaging. There's a lot going on with digital these days, but the voice moving messages by voice is kind of the common denominator among pretty much all hams. We can all do it. You don't need a computer. You don't need a modem. You just basically need a radio and a microphone. So I wanted to kind of go back over some of the basic procedures that I think most of us knew, but often it gets ignored. I hear that on nets all the time. It gets really frustrating. So this really applies to both tactical and formal messages. Tactical messages tend to be from you, maybe to a net control station or somebody reporting a situation or your relocation or your status, operating status. Whereas a formal message typically will be coming from an authority, and you're simply uh, the passer of those messages. Um, and it could be requesting resources or instructing resources, whatever it may be. So, but in both cases, some good basic protocols are called for, and the more you practice them, like anything else, the more you practice them and do them, the more second nature they will become, and you will get it through. The first thing, and this is something that happens more often, is somebody will call with a message, and as soon as you acknowledge them, they start on with a message without knowing whether you're ready to copy, whether you're busy talking to the agency. They just start talking, and sometimes I've had those go on for 5 minutes and tie up a frequency. So the very first thing you got to do: establish contact. Net control. This is Valley Presbyterian Hospital, whatever your call is at the time, and then you wait for them to acknowledge. Once they acknowledge, then you say, I have a message. Okay. And they may or not be ready to copy. So, first thing you want to do is let them know if there's a specific format, such as an ICS 213, an ARL radiogram, infrastructure status report, a resource request, whatever it may be. Let them know what the format is. When both sides of the communication know the format, it minimizes errors. It gets the receiving station ready for what's coming and roughly in what sequence it's coming. What kind of information am I expecting? Am I expecting a radiogram number of a precedence and a check and all that? Am I expecting an infrastructure, point by point report? So make sure if there's any format other than just plain text, let them know what it is. It'll make the receiving station much more ready to copy, and it'll be a lot more efficient. So advise once you let them know what you have, what kind of message it is, the format, advise when ready to copy. Okay. If you don't do this, they may not be ready. And as I say, I've had, huge, especially on a repeater based net where a lot of different stations, we had, dozens of different stations in a statewide medical exercise. Everybody hung up because one station, without bothering to check if I was ready, rambled on with an uncondensed 5-minute monologue at conversational, not writing speed. Oh my God, it just screwed everything up. I don't normally correct people on the air, but I had to do that one because it just caused a huge collision. So make sure they are ready to copy, and then you can proceed. Now, reading at copy speed. One of the things I've done as an exercise in our some of our training meetings is normally you go around, everybody introduces themselves, right? Well, I have them do that as part of an exercise. Each person's going to stand up and introduce themselves for specific information like, name, first name, call sign, appointment, whatever, and have everybody else log it. And when we get to the end, we look and see what sort of trouble people had. And the most common complaint is they went too fast. So I always suggest when you're sending a message that somebody is expected to write down, now maybe a tactical message, you don't have to do this. You say, N6VI has arrived at the assignment location or arrived at staging. That's fine. But if you have something that somebody has to copy, make sure you say it at the speed that you could write it yourself. There are a few speed writers out there, like our section traffic manager, Kate Hutton. She can take stuff down at almost any speed, but most people can't. And accuracy trumps speed. So it's going to sound very slow. It's going to seem very slow, especially if it's a real incident and your adrenaline's going. It's going to seem painfully slow, but it usually means you'll only have to go through it once instead of multiple times. And twice through fast is usually not as efficient as once through more slowly, more paced. And when you're just a little tip too, when you're sending a text message, if you have some long words in there, I know some people will say, well, I'll go slowly. Use the speed at which you could write, okay? And for a bunch of short words, that's okay. But if you have long words that take a long time to write and you use the same spacing, that's going to screw it up. Leave more time for them to write long words, and you can go a little more quickly on short words. When you're done, end of message, over. Okay, so now they know it's done, and you're going to have to wait. They may not come back to you right away, but they may say stand by while they do a word count or finish writing, whatever it may be. So let's now talk about using pro words. These are basically to help the receiving station understand what's coming. And the first one, I spell, is something that you use after you've said the word. So for example, I'll give you a couple of examples, but you say the word and then I spell, and then you use phonetics afterward. So that way they kind of know what the whole word is, but then they know that the spelling is coming. The other three you use before you actually say whatever it is. So if you're going to give a street address, a number of numbers, it would be figures 17253. Okay, and then they know that those numbers are coming. Letter group is a group of, it could be acronyms or whatever. Aries, ARES. Okay, Alpha Romeo Echo Sierra. That's a letter group. A mixed group would be a combination of letters and numbers. For example, a call sign is a mixed group. So when you're going along and reading this, using these pro words will help the receiving station either know what to come next or how to spell something that may either be an unusual word or one where there are homophones. There are many different spellings. I mean, to TO, to TOO, to TWO. If the meaning is important, you want to get it right. Let's look at a couple of examples here. If you're going to tell somebody part of the message is it's located on Zizix Road, and by the way, that's a real road in up in the California desert. You would say located on Zizix, I spell Zulu, Zulu, Yankee, Zulu, X-ray, road. Okay, look at the second one. You're giving some coordinates. You'd start with figures 34.25 degrees north, figures 118.26 degrees west. Notice I didn't say 34 and 118. Whenever you're giving a series of numbers, always use individual digits, because 18 and 80 or 15 and 50 sound very similar, especially when conditions are less than optimal. So individual characters, decimal for the point, and precede with the word figures, and then they know it's coming. If you refer to the Northwest District Aries meeting, that would be Northwest District letter group Alpha Romeo Echo Sierra meeting. Okay, number 4. 1, I spell Oscar November Echo, Kenwood, mixed group, Tango Kilo, 981 transceiver. Um, look at number 7. Um, the mixed group Fox Tango 60 goes to mixed group Kilo Juliet 6 Charlie November Oscar by parcel post. Okay, so you see how some of these could be either confused or otherwise miscopied if you don't let them know what's coming or spell it if it's unusual. So now you've got the message through, you've used the pro words, and you're waiting for the operator to confirm. The operator on the other end may not be ready to give you the okay on the message because maybe there's something they missed. And it could be propagation took a dive for a minute, they got some interference on the repeater, or the spouse came in and asked them a question while they were in the middle of copying. Um, so in that case, the receive operator, because they're missing or unclear on some of the content, will ask for fills. Now, there's a proper way to ask for and give fills, and we'll go through that in just a moment. But importantly, if they ask for a couple of missing words, don't read the whole message over unless they ask you to. Okay. That's wasting a lot of airtime. And especially when you're talking about a repeater based net, airtime may be very precious. There may be other activities, other stations that need to use the frequency. So don't just read it the whole thing over. It's sort of like when I hear a net and a net control says, okay, the Kilo Alpha Charlie, say again your prefix. And what do? They give the whole prefix, the whole call sign again. They don't want the whole call sign, they just want the prefix. So listen to what the operator asks for. And if the operator asks the right way, you'll know exactly what to give them. So here are some of the ways a receiving operator can request fills, okay, for anything that's missed or unclear. Start by say again. I don't say repeat because repeat under difficult conditions sounds like received, and that could throw everything off. So say again, all before, let's say if you miss the first 4 words, all before meeting, or all after March, um, or say again, word before if you just missed one word, or say again, word after if you just missed one word. If there's a section in the middle, say again, all between word 1 and word 2. Okay, so say again should be precede any request for fills, and then tell them specifically what you want. Either the whole beginning section, a whole end section, word before, word after, and all between. And you may have multiple holes in the message. The receiver may have multiple holes in the message. So you may have several fills. They may say again, word before meeting. And you say, I say again, mixed group Alpha Romeo Echo Sierra meeting, over. And then they need another one. Say again, word after something else. So they may use multiple of these. So just one at a time, knock them out until the messages, and finally you'll get Roger your message, or Roger your message number 123. And then you'll know that everything is gone. And again, accuracy trumps speed. So be patient with the receiving operator. You don't know what they're dealing with on their end. I've had situations where they located me for a hospital drill up in an equipment room that had HVAC equipment for a huge building running, and it was noisy, and I had headphones on, but it was still a pain. So, be patient with the receiving operator. Your job is to help them get it right. And this is the sort of way that you could do that. So then wait for that acknowledgement from the receiving station. You're going to get Roger your message, or the receiving station may say stand by if they're still writing, or they have something they have to stop and do. Questions so far? Okay, let's move. So then once you get the acknowledgement, then you're either going to send the next message Or if that was the last message, you say, end of message, no more. And when they've got it, you can say, you know, Hollywood Valley Presbyterian clear and your FCC call sign. Now, assuming you're on the ham bands, remember you always need your FCC call sign, because a tactical call, while very useful, is not a substitute for your ID required by Part 97. And usually this won't be after every time you let go of the mic button, but it's at the end of the exchange. It's, end of a transmission or series of transmissions. That's what's in Part 97. And extend back and forth of a message and providing fills, that's a series of transmissions. So when you're done, you give the FCC call sign, assuming you're on amateur frequencies. If you're not on amateur frequencies, if you're using a sheriff's department radio or fire department radio, do not give your FCC call sign. It's not only not suggested, it's not legal, because that misidentifies the station that's actually the RF is coming from. It's not an amateur station at that point. And if you get familiar with this procedure, you'll know when somebody else is using the frequency and you have a message to send, when they send their FCC call, that means this is the end of this series of transmissions. I'm done. And what it basically says, without having to use so many words, is that the frequency is now available for somebody else to use it who needs it. Okay, let's talk about tactical call signs for a minute. I remember back when I was vice director for the league, getting a call from a section emergency coordinator in another section who said they had a member in their Aries group who insisted that tactical call signs were illegal on amateur bands. And of course, they're absolutely not illegal. There's no problem using them at all. In fact, it's encouraged to use them in certain situations. Those tactical calls, it's sort of like telling people your name or your location. There's nothing illegal about that, and there's nothing illegal about using an agreed upon tactical call sign, as long as you remember to give your FCC call when the time comes. So what are tactical call signs? First, it's a radio identifier, and it could be assigned to a location or a function or a team in any incident or ongoing operation or a drill. Notice it is not typically assigned to an individual. Now, it may be in some circumstances where one person is going to be the only one there, but that's kind of by default. The intent is that it goes with the function. And why is that good? Well, especially in a longer operation, you may have multiple operators there and one relieves the other. You may have a shift change. And if I want to talk to Valley Presbyterian Hospital, I don't want to have to figure out which operator is there at the time, because if I give the call, oh, I know Fred's there. Hey, W6ABC, this is net control. Well, what if Fred's on a break and somebody else is there and they say, well, that's not me, so I'm not going to answer. Okay. You should be able to, you have one list of locations and or functions or whatever it is, and you use that list. That's who you call, and whoever happens to be manning the radio at that location or for that function, that's the operator that's going to answer. You don't have to know who it is, and they don't have to know who you are. You just have to know the tacticals and what they represent. Okay, now they can be descriptive. West Shelter, dispatch, fire recon, incident command, or they could be non-descriptive, Team Bravo or Unit 6 or whatever. I remember at a statewide medical exercise we did many years ago. We were at UCLA Medical Center, and we were working with the staff there and with the California National Guard. And the exercise had to do with a radiological incident, a terrorist radiological incident. And so they were actually using the opportunity to try out their off-site decontamination trailer. And So we were going to be using 2 meters, but the three of us there, we had one of them was located at the incident command center, one was located at the decontamination trailer, and one was located at the triage area where it was outside the building where they got people, they checked them before they let them in the building so they wouldn't, bring the biological or radiological stuff inside. But we knew that, even though we were going to say this is a drill, we didn't want people to freak out where we start talking about, triage and decontamination. So we decided to use more generic tactical calls. So incident command was admin, the decontamination unit was trailer, and the triage area was reception. Okay, so the titles themselves, although they were related to what we were doing, didn't stir any fear among somebody who happened to be casually tuning by. Okay, so why are tactical call signs useful? We said they don't change when operators rotate out of a given assignment, so it's consistent for every other user. It makes it easier to use one communication channel, particularly like a repeater, by several different operating units. And as I said, if you're going to use these, the time to figure it out is before or at the time of deployment. Everybody needs to know. They should all have a list of what's my tactical, what's everybody else's tactical, where, how do I call net control? How do I call this law enforcement unit? How do I call this or that? Okay. And once you've decided on those, you stick with them throughout the entire incident. This same different medical exercise, also at UCLA, uh, their medical building is like almost RF shielded, and you can't get a lot of signals out of there. So we had somebody, uh, one of their people near the door using, and they handed me one of their commercial UHF radios. And then I was up on the roof of an adjacent building sending stuff down to the medical alert center, which was about 80 miles away. And as I was listening, I heard all sorts of, just basically poor radio procedure. These are mostly people who are medically trained, but they don't use radios on a day-to-day basis. And so you're hearing, Mary, can you hear me? Now, this is UCLA Medical Center, thousands of people. Who's Mary and who are you? Okay. I heard their incident command station being called by uh, 5 or 6 different names because they'd never figured out, they'd never told everybody what tactical call to use. So it was kind of mass confusion for a while. I offered to give their non-radio people a short course, an hour or so course in basic radio protocol. Same kind of thing we teach to CERT teams when they're going to be using FRS radios. That same protocol works very well with non-amateur means of communication like FRS radios or commercial UHF radios, business band radios. It works out quite well. Okay, so we said tactical calls are legal. They're not part of a Part 97 station ID. And so that's why you send your FCC call when you're done at the end of every series of transmissions. But as we said, if you're using some other non-amateur radio service like sheriff radios or fire department radios, then they ID automatically. Usually it's a CW ID fast, and that goes on, and you don't have to worry about IDing the radio or where the transmission's coming from. And you don't want to use your amateur call there because it's not a Part 97 radio that you're talking on. So in that case, don't worry about anything other than the tactical call. That's all you need. So how do we use a tactical call correctly? I know some police departments and other law enforcement, they start with who they are and then who they're calling. And I understand that's because if, let's say, they're in a life-threatening situation, shots fired or something, they need, and usually they're going to be calling the same place all the time, their dispatch center. They need to let them know who it is that's in trouble. Nowadays, with the modern radios that they use, generally it identifies, it's all part of the the digital signature on the radio, like P25 or something, they'll know who's calling. But if they needed to know who's in trouble and they only got a few words out, at least this way they know who they're looking for. But other than that, normal procedure for everybody else, whether it's aircraft, military, amateur, is start with who you're calling. Command, this is West Shelter. And then you'll use those tacticals throughout the exchange. And then after the last transmission, then West Shelter clear, K7 XYZ. Okay, so we said already, this meets your ID requirements and signals the other station that the frequency is now available for somebody else. If you read about these things and then you don't put them into practice when you do your drills and exercises, you're going to forget it. And the people on the other end are going to forget it or get confused. The only way to really learn this is to use it routinely, and then will become second nature. Anybody know the answer to this joke? This is the tourist who was in New York, and he came up to a cab driver and asked, "How do you get to Carnegie Hall?" And the
Practice,
answer is
practice, practice.
practice, practice, practice. You got it. Okay, so not long, about 20 minutes, but let's get some questions and comments. Barry, anything in chat?
Nope, we're pretty good in chat.
Anybody with examples of when that worked really well or when things went south because people didn't do it?
A lot of the fire departments use message received. It's a little longer, but it's very specific and understandable.
And fire departments, just like law enforcement, often they have their own terminology that they use. For example, when in LAFD, if a unit is leaving a station, they're headed out to an incident, they just call Metro, show task force 75 en route to incident number so and so, or show this unit not available mechanical, or show it in-house, in station. That's their terminology, and that's what they're used to. And generally, by the way, by monitoring that, there's almost never a request for repeats or fills. Again, there's a lot of pre-known and assumed knowledge about locations, about incident types that they all understand. So they will do it a little differently than the rest of us.
They'll also use 10 codes and things like that we should not use.
Hey, Rob, good to see you. Yes. Yeah. The FEMA mantra, of course, is plain language. And I've read that, certain 10 codes in one location can mean I'm going out to lunch, and another one, it can mean we're under fire. Yeah, that's a good point. Plain language usually wins the day.
Okay, Paul, I got your hand up.
Hey, Paul.
And yeah, I have two examples. One, a friend of mine used to give me a bad time if I would say my call sign fast, but I said if I'm checking in or they've never heard it, I give it really slow. But if I've talked with somebody a number of times and at the end I'm just giving my tactical call sign, my FCC ID, I might give real quick because by then they already know what it is.
Good
and the
point.
other ones, yes, security where I worked, they would do the ID where they would say their name first, and they said if they were in a fast-moving situation and they're calling the operator, which is who they usually call, at least I think they're probably either in a fast-moving situation or they're fast keying, and so they wanted their ID to get out quick. But of course, we understand law enforcement does it different than we do. As long as we understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Over.
Yeah, I had a really I have an example of when just kind of the opposite of that, when somebody who's relatively new to radio, they give their call phonetically, and then every time they give their call, they do it phonetically again, long and slow. And by that time, nobody needs that anymore. It ties up space, and you get Kilo Delta 6 X-ray Yankee every single time they turn on the microphone. It's like, good Lord. So we have to kind of teach them. But yeah, in a net situation, if when you're using your amateur call, it's good practice to give it phonetically the first time, like when you're checking into a net or you're joining a group. And after that, you don't need to use phonetics. So thank you for that. Other comments, questions?
Learning to speak at writing speed is very difficult. It really does need to be practiced.
And even if you think you're going slowly, the person on the other end may still be struggling. Again, the more pressure you're under, the more likely you are to go quickly, to speak quickly. And I remember one multi-agency exercise we were doing. We had an observer. She was kind of a friend of Aries. She's not a ham, but she was the disaster coordinator for one of the hospitals we serve. Really nice gal and very knowledgeable in her area. But she was watching us pass messages. She said, "You're going so slowly." And to a layperson, they say, "Yeah, that seems really silly." But they don't realize that somebody on the other end has to write it down. And that's, we're trying to accommodate that. And as I say, going over it slowly once may be more efficient than going over it, too quickly 3 or 4 times. Who else?
Don't be bashful.
Come on, I don't get paid if we don't go 30 minutes. Oh, we did go 30 minutes. Okay, never mind.
You made it. You made it. All right, Gene, take it away.
His
Gene?
bonus doesn't go until you go 45.
Oh, okay. Gene, you had another question or comment?
Yeah, good evening, everybody on the net. This is November 3X Uniform Sierra. Gene and Glorious Clean. Everybody's having a good night. Number one, excellent reminder of stuff that we probably all pretty much knew already. But like you said, if you don't use it or practice it that much, you do kind of forget. And when you get into those situations in which you're assisting served agencies, that's a long time to try to remember. But anyway, great job. We use tactical call signs here for every EOC within two counties during the eclipse. Each EOC had a different tactical call sign, with the main EOC, which was at the county comm center. They were basically net control, and so instead of saying the specific name of the place, like Hospital A, School B, that type of stuff.
Excellent.
So each site had a tactical call sign as well.
And of course, this was an event that they do in advance. They were planning for, and so they had time to get that out. But even if time is limited, that's one of the first things that should go out. So yeah, I'm sure that made things go much more smoothly when you had multiple agencies and parallel agencies in different counties. And by the way, I tell this to the CERT folks, where they may be responding to each team may be responding to a couple of block area, a neighborhood. If you're going to pick tactical calls on the fly, don't just say, triage. Maybe it means you need, Burbank Avenue triage, because you have several groups that may be using the same frequency, and they have similar functions at that CERT group to your CERT group. And so you don't want to know which ones are fire suppression. Who's fire suppression? Is it Burbank Avenue fire suppression, or is it Roland Heights fire suppression? So try to make those things specific when there are likely to be multiple teams out doing similar kinds of jobs. Good point.
Well, I think that a lot of areas that developed an emergency plan as we, in preparation for the eclipse, regardless of how it turned out, I think SOPs are going to be written based upon the planning that's been documented, and those technical call signs will probably be part of that SOP for the
Yeah,
future.
I'll bet there's going to be some good lessons learned from those who didn't do that and take that preparatory step, and hopefully they will pick it up later. Rob.
I think another important thing that I've seen happen, and we all do it, well, a lot of us do it on casual nets, is we want to always see international phonetics used. We may use APCO phonetics with police and fire if we're using their equipment, but for the good of the person writing it down, they need to know the international phonetics, not the cute ones you make up for your call,
Yeah.
that we use, on a casual net. Use international phonetics, period, and it'll make life so much better for the other end.
That should be the default unless there's some pressing reason not to. In the sheriff's department, DCS, they require that we use APCO phonetics on all our stuff. And I've heard that really backfire on occasion. Conditions are bad, there's repeater interference, and some guy was checking into a simple net, no emergency going on, and his call was like, Alpha Bravo Papa, but he was using, Adam Boy Paul, and the guy on the other end thought it was Adam Boy Tom. Tom and Paul sound almost exactly the same when the consonants are blurred. One of the brilliant things about the phonetic alphabet used by ICAO and NATO and so on is that every word, if spoken correctly, every phonetic word has a different combination of vowel sounds. And of course, when conditions get bad, the consonants are the first things to go. The vowels are the last things to go. And if he had heard papa as opposed to tango, that it would have made it so much easier. But it took 4 or 5 tries for them to get this call sign. I was just sitting there laughing my butt off because I thought, that's one of the consequences of using an alphabet that was kind of randomly picked with names and stuff rather than purposely built. So yeah, definitely. Now, I had an interesting experience, by the way. I like to operate CQ Worldwide from other places around the world. I've done like 22 of the 40 zones. And a couple of years ago, I did a guest operation in Japan, single op on phone. And of course, I was using the normal phonetics, Juliet Hotel 1, Foxtrot Hotel Bravo, but we ended up, I kept getting asked for repeats all the time. So I ended up changing it to, instead of, sorry, it was Japan Foxtrot 1. I changed it to Japan Florida 1 instead of Juliet Foxtrot 1. Because as I listened, all the other JF1s use Japan Florida 1. And people on the other end are used to hearing that. And when I changed that and then I used country names for the suffix rather than the normal phonetics, my request for repeats and fills went down to almost nothing. So that's a case where doing it the right way, the technically right way, was not the most efficient. But that's kind of an unusual situation.
Okay, Diana, you had your hand up. You took it down. You still have a question?
When Paul has his up too. Diana?
It wasn't a question as much as a comment that
Sure.
I'm a relatively new ham, and this has been really nice because when I got my tech license, I was handed a list and told on Monday nights you're going to check in this net, on Tuesday nights you're going to check into ACS net, on Thursday nights you're going to check, and there was no instructions. I didn't know how to figure out what the word, what the phonetic alphabet words were. I didn't know how I was supposed to do it. And I mean, eventually, yes, I learned, but there's still things that I'm hearing here that I've haven't heard before. So this has been really nice. Thank you.
Well, good. I'm glad it's helpful. And when my wife first got licensed, which is about 14 years ago, um, she had, she was new to the phonetic alphabet, of course, although she knew some things like my call sign because she kept hearing it all the time. So she started, as she was driving places, she would use the phonetics on the license plates or on street signs or building signs, whatever. And she got very good at it. And in fact, for the last 10 years, she has been a national traffic system operator and including a net control for NTS. So, where they have formal messages and stuff. So she got good at it, but again, practice, practice. And in fact, every time she goes on a net just to listen, just to check in, she keeps her own hand log. So, I mean, she's logging all the time. And so going from the ear to the paper becomes, second nature. Very good. Paul? You're muted, Paul.
There we go. Yeah. Since a lot of the nets we do are training nets, if someone were to check in as India Sugar America, when our net control says it back, they'll use the proper phonetics. They won't really give them a hard time. They'll just echo the proper phonetics.
Okay, they'll model the right behavior.
Right, to model the right behavior. Now, the only one I think I would give a hard time, and I wish we really could kill, one that I found no evidence for anywhere, is kilowatt. If you give me a kilowatt, I'm going to say kilo whiskey.
Yeah.
Everybody else, I'll give a pass, but that one is just horrible.
Yeah.
And for the new hams,
that one I think tends to happen among DXers who, kilowatt, Romeo, whatever.
Yeah, that one is a really bad one.
But it's a waste of time. It's too long. And again, it defeats the basic purpose.
Right. So plain talk and keep it short. And for that new ham that was just on, I remember when I first listened to check-ins, they're saying we're going to check in by your call sign suffix.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have to listen for a while to figure out what do they mean by that. And so it takes a while.
In our preamble for our AriesNet, we say, we're checking by the alphabetical groups based on the first letter of your suffix. That is the first letter after the number in your call sign.
Right. And I think that would be good. And if I get to be net control again, I think I'm going to switch it so that we have guests and visitors, first timers check in first as a courtesy. Because I know when I first checked into nets, it took 6 or 7 times because I would have to remember it. I'd have to be free at that time. My battery had to be good. My antenna had to be good. And so there was any number of mistakes that got making before I even got to that point. And so if you give them a chance to check in at the beginning, then check in all the regulars, then come back at the end. And by then, maybe they fix the problem and now they can check in. Because if they miss that check-in, they may never come back.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Over.
Good point. Rich, NI6H.
Hi, Marty. I'm been in the command centers of my local hospital numerous times for drills and a couple of actual events. We still had some cell, and they were able to communicate with others pretty easily around our county, other hospitals. In the event that is not happening, and we need to bring in third-party traffic on over the radios in the command centers. Can you give some guidance as other than me grabbing the mic and IDing every 10 minutes? Is there any other guidance you might lend on that?
In terms of how to get the traffic in, or how we should go when we
what kind of oversight should I be careful of, while they're
okay? If let's say you have to hand your microphone off to an emergency room nurse, okay, the nurse in charge or something, because they're going to talk to somebody and they're going to use some terminology that you may not be familiar with. It's perfectly legal to do that, as long as it's domestic, which in this case it would be, and B, you as the control operator maintain, you don't have to have your hand on the microphone, but you have to watch what's going on and, and be ready to jump in and identify or do whatever you need to do. So it's not unheard of to just hand the microphone to whatever agency personnel you're doing and just show them what to do and let them go ahead back and forth, and then you take care of the call sign and clearing and everything at the end.
Yeah, that's good. I got that. But is there any information that they may want to be passing that, you know, we should be cautious about in hospital community? If
Well,
two
yeah, okay.
unhams, you know, are talking.
First, there are more constraints on them as if you're talking about a hospital
Yeah.
because of HIPAA than there
Okay.
are on us. Okay, it's not
All
our
right.
HIPAA is not our problem if they're the ones on the microphone. They are fully aware of that and have to be careful. The one thing that you need to be careful of as a Part 97 licensee is having them devolve to business communication. In other words, hey, you know, we need to get our payroll stuff over here because the checks aren't printing. Okay, that's a business. That's not life safety.
Yeah.
And so that's the sort of thing that should not, you know, that's not one of the uses of amateur radio for that sort of thing. So as long as you know, are aware of the circumstances and the kind of traffic being sent, and it's clearly not commercial, it's not forwarding their business, it's actually patient welfare, patient safety kind of thing, then you're probably fine.
No problem talking about blood supplies or.
No. Now,
And
the other thing you should make sure they're aware of is that none of our communications are encrypted. They are not private. There's no expectation of privacy. So, you know, as long as, you know, they're not passing something that they don't want leaked out to the general public, like, hey, you know, our blood supplies are all gone and people are going to die. Okay. You know, they may
Yikes.
need to look to solicit some more supplies from the public, but that's probably not the way they want them to find out.
Okay, Marty, thank you.
Sure thing. Thank you. Gene, go ahead.
Yes, for a short period of time, I had a job at the communications center at the police headquarters here in Killeen.
Mhm.
And at every workstation, there was a laminated sheet that showed the phonetic alphabet and right next to it, the APCO alphabet. You know, so that, because a lot of times these people coming in to work there, coming from a military background,
They're
and
talking
so
to
they're
two
not
worlds,
used
right?
to APCO. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so like, at least if they heard, you know, Baker said Baker, oh, bravo, okay.
You know,
You know,
cheat sheets are good. Cheat
Yeah.
sheets are good, and that's a great idea to have them. In fact, I keep one with my DCS stuff because I devolve into ICAO phonetics just because of, you know, 57 years of habit. And I have to have it in front of me because sometimes I'll blank on a particular APCO phonetic letter. So yeah, having that handy is a good idea for everybody. And as you say, for somebody who comes from one background where that's all they use, this would be a good thing, a good reference for them. Rob, you've had to deal with both worlds in that. Does that any other tricks or suggestions?
No, having both available is a good idea. Here in our area, we don't have that much because we tend not to use their radios. But you know, sometimes you may need both, and it's good to have a cheat sheet that has it. And you know, I think the real irritation on most nets is when people use their you know, funny phonetics for their call that we remember.
Yeah.
That's
I
the one we
remember
really shouldn't be using.
Yeah, I remember a field day that we had a group of contesters, old time high power DXers. They went up on a mountain and they had the K6 BAG, K6 boys and girls sometimes, but they also use K6 Bagel Able Gable, just to throw a wrench into it. Yeah, as I say, there may be circumstances with deviation from the normal phonetics. Now, when I'm on the radio, I try to have at least one alternative for some letters that may be problematic, especially when you're talking to hams in foreign countries and maybe, you know, these are all English words and we're familiar with them. They may not be. So sometimes I have to, for example, South America, you know, you may use, you know, Santiago or Argentina or Colombia rather than, you know, the Charlie and Alpha and so on. So I try to have some of those in my back pocket in case the normal one doesn't work.
Paul makes a
Anybody
good,
else?
really should call them reference sheets. They're not cheat sheets.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Well, that's the shorthand, but yes,
Right, yeah.
yes. Written reference material. And by the
Right.
way, having all your reference material on a computer could be problematic if there's a power outage or a surge or something else. You know, good old pen and paper never runs out of batteries. And having the stuff in a binder, having the forms necessary, it may not be the most efficient way to do it, but it's kind of the fail safe. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you guys. This has been a good discussion, and appreciate all your input and suggestions.
This has also been a first. Marty's wrapping up early.
Yeah, usually you can't stop me talking.
Good reference. Good refresher for everybody.
Right. Thanks,
Yes.
everybody.
Yes, thank you
What-
very much, Marty. Thank you very much for doing this tonight for us.
All right,
One of
great
the
to
other-
see you all.
When the net control speaks fast, people tend to check in fast. So when the net control reads the preamble, he should talk at writing speed.
Well, I don't know about writing speed, but distinctly and clearly.
Yes.
And again, as net control, I tend to use, I don't use forms. I have net controls that are, somebody calls and then there's a 10-second delay while they're trying to find it on a list. I start with a blank piece of paper, write down what I hear, because that's what contesters do. And so there's no real delay. But also when a net control comes back, and this is not a net control class, but remember, all acknowledgments should be specific. If I hear somebody say, this is W6ABC, I need an early, and net control says, I got you. Okay. What if somebody else was calling at the same time? And sometimes that happens. So everybody thinks they're checked in and nobody's sure which one really is. So, W6ABC got you early. Okay, you're good. So all net control inquiries and acknowledgments should be specific to the station that called, and they should name the station that called. The same is true when you're at a drill or an exercise or an incident using tactical calls. Always the net control should be coming back to the tactical call, not just say, go ahead with your message. Valley Presbyterian, ready to copy your message. So that specificity can save a lot of confusion where there are a lot of stations on the air.
Well, Paul's got his hand up, so we're still going.
Oh, Paul.
Oh, yeah. I guess if we ever do a session on our pet peeves, mine would be the one where the net control says, well, do we have anybody, want to come back? And before the tail can drop on the repeater, they're saying, okay, nothing heard.
Oh.
And I wish a lot of times people would add, 5 seconds. I mean, a lot of people,
just like adding a break, like adding a break in a round table for somebody to jump in.
Exactly. And then
join the group. Yeah. Yeah.
Round table is something that's a good idea. And I've noticed in some areas, people are used to the round table, but in other areas, if a new person jumps in, they might talk back and forth with the one person, and then the third one gets left out. And so we've got to teach them round table this, and then person 3 can skip if they want.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Very good. All right. Very good. Well, thanks again, folks. Everybody have a good evening, and we will see you next week.
73s, have a good weekend, everybody.
Coming.
Good night.